you guys hear me? Am I good? Is that working? Thanks, Heather, and thanks to Turk and everybody for hosting us, and thank you guys all for coming out. It's great. It's really boring to just talk to myself about this stuff. Anyway, so Heather kind of covered who I am. I am co-founder and co-executive director of the Tahoe Institute for Natural Science. I have you guys captive. Just wanted to mention a couple things real quick about who we are and what we do. I know there's a few members in the audience, so nice to see. Thanks for coming out. We are a research, education, and outreach organization here in Tahoe that is largely focused on terrestrial natural history topics. So there's a lot of great organizations that are doing a ton of great work on issues of water-related stuff, and we're trying to pick up some of the slack with more of the upland natural history. We have a long-term goal of bringing a world-class interpretive nature center to the area. So over 3 million plus visitors a year come through Tahoe, and truly the Lawn Center here is probably the best interpreter center we got. This and Taylor Creek, but we'd like to develop a place where people can learn about all sorts of different natural history topics. So if you can envision a Sierra-specific, Tahoe-centric California Academy type place with real-world research. So that's one of the main areas of our programming. Most of the research that we do is related to wildlife issues, all sorts of stuff. I won't get into it. We do a lot of going on in the background. That's the dream. So it's a ways off, but speaking of real natural history education, this is Kirk right here. This is my main partner in crime, and he and Amy, wherever she is, around here somewhere, there's Amy, get into all the classrooms around here that they can, do supplemental science curricula, teaching about birds and bats and bugs, and Amy's developing a mammal program, seed dispersal, and all kinds of stuff. Field trips, summer camps, and we do lots and lots of outreach for people out of school, like this, lectures and presentations. Here's me talking about butterflies. And we do, part of that is we do lots and lots of free guided hikes, lots of outings. So if you guys want to come on a wildflower walk, want to come birding with us, make sure you sign up tonight. Robin's in the back. Pardon?
Christmas bird count's up.
Oh, I know. Just shoot away. Anyway, make sure you get on our email list, and we send out an email about once a month about all our upcoming activities and outings. We do have our own bird festival in June down in South Lake. It's a lot of fun. Live falcons on hand. We do a bunch of citizen science, which is an opportunity for you guys to become part of the data collection process. Great example of that is coming up next Friday, and that is the Christmas bird count. This has been going on since when, Robin?
1900.
1900 is the largest, oldest citizen science program in the world. There are thousands of count circles all over the place, most of them in the United States. The Lake Tahoe one has been a little bit off and on since 1977, centered down at South Lake. And I've been coordinating it since about 2000, for about 12 years. And it's a lot of fun. Basically, we just go birding all day, right around Christmas. And so some days it's snowy, some years it's not. Great for kids, and we see all kinds of fun stuff that you wouldn't know is out there. This is a northern pygmy owl. This was actually, I took this picture right at twilight on Christmas bird count day, but this was at Kings Beach, but nonetheless. Anyway, here are the details that you need to know immediately, and that is that it's a week from Saturday, and if you have any questions, Robin is going to be in the back, and she's going to be coordinating everybody. We're in this picture. This is from 2008. We're all looking at 3 bald eagles in a tree right across the canal. It's a lot of fun. Okay, but I'm here to talk to you guys about winter wildlife survival strategies, and it's going to be a little bit of a show and tell kind of thing. There's a bunch of different considerations that the animals that live here, even if only in the summer, have to contend with in the winter that we don't, and we're lucky for it. It's a big crowd, but if you guys have questions as I'm going along, if I use a big word that you want clarified, anything like that, feel free to throw up a hand, and if I don't see your hand, you can interrupt me. That's fine, unless we get too bogged down. But anyway, all right. So if we lived on the equator, we wouldn't be talking about this at all. But we do live in a temperate zone. We're about 39 degrees north latitude here, and as a consequence of the Earth being tilted on its axis, during the winter time, it's tilted away from the sun, and we're getting a lot less solar radiation. Right? This is basic earth science stuff from elementary school, but we forget about it. And not only is latitude important, but we're up here in the mountains, and so even though, let's say, we're pretty well south of Red Bluff, California, winter's a much bigger deal, and it's this tilt in the Earth going as we go around the sun that gives us seasons. It makes things interesting, I think. We get to rock climb and ski. But it's a hassle for a lot of the organisms around here. And some of the main things that come into play during winter, we have much shorter days, being tilted away from the sun as we are, which consequently means much longer nights that you have to endure. So shorter days if you're day active, shorter days to go about your business, and longer nights to suffer through. Colder temperatures, right? So this puts a real strain on your energy balance. You need to make sure you've got enough food on board to stay warm if you're a warm-blooded organism, which a lot of things are. Freezing temperatures present a sort of a fundamental problem. Most organisms are made up largely of water, ourselves included. And when water freezes, it has the unique property of expanding and becoming crystalline and becoming very jagged and sharp. And freezing water is basically just tiny little razor blades in your cells. So mountaineers and losing toes, that's what that is. Frostbite. So everybody's got to worry about how to deal with ice forming within your cellular tissue. Snow presents all sorts of challenges, but also some opportunities as well. One of the main things, here in the Sierras in particular, we get very deep snowpacks. So this is great for building up our water reserves for the summer. But if you're a critter that likes to run around on the ground, you may have a hard time getting around. All your resources may be completely buried. You may have a hard time moving around on the landscape. Deer, in particular, very hard time with even very shallow snow. And so they got to split. But snow also presents some opportunities in that it can provide shelter from predators and some insulation from colder air temps. So during the winter, here we also encounter a lot of storms, high wind conditions. This really wreaks havoc on things that are trying to stick around and be active. And then just general scarcity of food. In the summer, we've got these long days, so much more productivity, so there's more vegetation, there's more insects, there's just more stuff, there's more life happening. Winter is the opposite of that for most organisms. Summer's when the biology happens. Winter's when you really just have to try to shut down any thoughts of reproduction or growth and endure until the sun comes around next spring. Okay, so there's sort of three main strategies to cope with this, and there's a little bit of overlap. But by and large, most organisms find themselves on an evolutionary pathway that leads down one of these three roads. Right? And so option one is to leave. Get out of here. Migrate. Right? Option 2 is to conserve your energy by shutting down, even if only for brief periods of time. And option 3 is to endure, is to tough it out. This is a chickadee in my backyard. I was thinking, I was telling somebody that most of these pictures are probably mine, but I should tell you when they're not. I didn't take this. Okay, so I'm going to talk about migration first. This is a very common and popular strategy, and employed by a great number of organisms, particularly our birds. So there's a few things to consider with migration. One, it's very costly in terms of your energetic demands, and so you've got to figure out a way, evolutionarily speaking, to have enough energy to pull this off, to be efficient enough with your locomotion to get to where you need to go, to have enough energy to get all the way there, and it's just got to be worthwhile. A lot of birds opt for this, though. Despite all the problems, it's very dangerous. As you're traveling from A to B, if you're going from here to here, you're going to cross through a lot of habitat, a lot of terrain, a lot of area where you've maybe never been before. Habitats where you aren't very well adapted to find food or find shelter. There's going to be all kinds of hazards along the way, different predators, windmills, communications towers, windows, cats, cars, you name it. Or even just getting stranded out in the desert and being unable to find food. If you are a bird watcher, the fall is a wonderful time to drive around to wet oases in southern Nevada, because birds from all over the place will just come into these little patches of green like they're on a tractor beam, and so you can find all kinds of birds. It's not as fun for birds, obviously. Another thing to think about, though, is competition. So if you think about, you live up here all summer and you got tons of space and it's, you know, lots of elbow room, and then you and millions of your friends all go to Panama for the winter. Panama's already full of birds, right? Costa Rica's already full of birds. Nicaragua's already full of birds. Like all through Central America, this is where a vast number of our summering birds go for the winter. And so when they get there, they're bumping elbows with all the birds that are already there, plus all the birds that have come from here to here. Think about that for a second. This is a big part of what has driven a lot of birds to migrate from here in the summer and take advantage of all the wide open spaces and resources and opportunity that we have in North America. Now, another thing to consider is how valuable an acre down here is versus, say, there. Right? It's vastly disproportionate. If you're going to migrate too, you got to figure out when, because we've already established that our birds are going to be here for the summer, okay, where it's nice and roomy, theoretically. But there is competition here as well, and the best spots may be taken by the time they get here if they get here too late. Right? So how does a western tanager know when to start flying north? I don't know. These things have to be worked out over generations and generations. If you come too early, you get the best spot, but we get a lot of late spring storms, and that's no good if the main part of your diet is insects. And yet, amazingly, there's pioneers that get here really early. The first tree swallows returning from the south come to Tahoe usually around the first week of March, which just seems insanely early. Other birds wait their turn. Willow flycatcher waits till first, second week of June. May's the big one. All right. So anyway. So that's the long-distance migrant, it's sort of the classic, but we have a lot of species here that only migrate as far as they have to. They really try to stick around as long as they can, And as long as they can meet their energetic demands and find food and don't get beat up too much by the weather, they'll stick around. So this is an Audubon's warbler. It's the western subspecies of the yellow-rumped warbler. It's a hardy, hardy little warbler, and they can eat berries, and occasionally they'll stick around. Last winter was a good example. It was so mild, there were a few of these yellow-rumps that stayed in Tahoe through the winter. Song sparrow, very common sparrow of our marshes and wetlands and riparian areas. They prefer to just stay all year if they can, and they get a jump on the competition come breeding season. But we get, a 10-foot storm, and you make your living by running around in the mud looking for seeds. What are you going to do? The other problem with big storms is it forces periods of inactivity for these birds as they're trying to forage. They can't. They got to just hunker down and wait it out. So when we get one of those 3-4 day storms, a bird this size, that's tough. That's really tough. So they hang out in the understory, under the snow where it's you got willows and stuff, kind of forming a little roof, and they wait it out. And then a lot of times, more often than not, after a couple of those really big storms, they're gone. They go down to Reno, down to Carson Valley, go down to Auburn. And then if we get a long period of nice weather, they come right back. Another great example of that is the robin. So these things will pile into suburban areas where there's ornamental shrubs with lots of berries on them, crab apples, fruit trees, and things like that. But they'll try to stick around through the winter. You can see a lot of them in the Tahoe Keys area in South Lake, but a couple of big walloping storms and they're gone. And then they'll all come back up if we have a really nice April. Okay, but not everybody gets to fly to and fro. I did not take that picture. So like I was mentioning, the deer have a really hard time. They're not built like moose. They start to show a little bit of a drag mark in the snow with as little as, I think, 12 inches of snow or something like that. So deer have a real tough time with deep snow. So our deer leave, and to do so they walk out, presumably along the same pathways every time. Once in a blue moon, and this does seem to happen more often than I thought, but I've been hearing more and more reports of it. They'll get trapped on this side of the passes, and so then they end up just going down. And the West Shore and Emerald Bay and stuff seems to be one spot where deer end up in the winter every handful of years. But that's no place to be. So most of them, they go up and over and out, right? So Kingsbury Grade, over anywhere in the Carson Range, Barker Pass, up over Tahoma and McKinney Rubicon, down the Truckee River Canyon, and even the Truckee population of deer, they all head down to Verdi, go down the Truckee River. Some of them go up over Stampede and all the way to Loyalton. They're getting that figured out. I live in Glenshire, and seems like some of my deer might do that. Yeah, so that's what they do, and then they follow the snow back remarkably early. Once it's nice and hard in the spring, they can kind of walk on it a lot better. Back east, they have what's called deer yards, and the deer all pile up into these little valleys where, for whatever reason, it doesn't snow as much. And it's called yarding. Ours don't do that. They just go downhill. But to go downhill, they got to go uphill first. Same problem that our mountain quail have. And believe it or not, the mountain quail, they walk out of the basin. And presumably, they follow the same traditional pathways that the deer are taking. No one's studied this, so we don't know for sure. But all the mountain quail split for the winter. You will sometimes see California quail around bird feeders through the winter, and sometimes mountain quail. But by and large, they leave. They walk out. They go down to Auburn. If you go down the west slope, it's a much longer walk, by the way. So it seems that a lot of our deer and quail and stuff probably head east. But think about how many footsteps that is. You've never seen a quail running along. They take a lot of steps. Does anybody know what this is?
Not sure.
Good guess, but it's not a snowshoe hare. Do you know?
Jackalope.
These are. Oops, keep doing that. So there's two of them here. These are up on Mount Rose. I can't remember exactly when these were taken, but this is about 9,000 feet on Mount Rose. And we do have snowshoe hare here, and a lot of people don't realize we have snowshoe hare here because they're nocturnal and they're pretty cryptic. So people don't see them that much. We also have its big cousin. This is Lepus townsendii. This is the white-tailed jackrabbit. And we have these, and we at TINS did a little study. We're still working with a lot of the rabbit stuff around here, but we did a study trying to establish the current distribution of the species at Tahoe and confirm that it even still existed. In 2001, the Lake Tahoe Watershed Assessment listed this species as extirpated from the whole basin, and NDOW also considered this species as extirpated from the whole region. So extinct, gone. But if you ski and you know how big these are, then maybe you encounter them from time to time. And they have very large, characteristic pellets that look like elk pellets. This is a massive, massive rabbit. Cottontail tops out maybe 3 pounds. Snowshoe hare, maybe 5 pounds. Black-tailed jackrabbit, maybe 7 pounds. A big male white-tailed jack could be 10 pounds. A pine marten could be like a pound. So, which seems low, but anyway, that's what they say. So anyway, white-tailed jackrabbits have a choice. If they're on the Carson Range, they'll go downhill. If they live near Carson Pass, right, if they're well inland and it'd be a very long walk, what they do is they go up. They go up to the high exposed ridges where the wind and sun sweeps all the snow off, and they can get at the vegetation and exist up there on the high ridge tops. So you can find these things right on top of Mount Rose, right on top of, Red Lake Peak and Friel, Jove's sister, in the heart of the winter, which is amazing. Very big, hardy rabbit. Okay, not all of our animals leave in the winter. Some of them actually come here in the winter. Typically things from further north. So this is common goldeneye, and this is one of the most abundant ducks out on the lake in the wintertime. They're here now, and you just see them peppered all over the water surface. And they need to come here because they breed up in the high boreal, and all the water where they live normally is frozen over, right? So they need open water so they can forage. This is a rough-legged hawk. This is a high Arctic hawk. They got little feet for a hawk. And they come down from the wide open tundra, and the problem that they face is snow up there covers up all their food. It's just too cold up there. I don't know exactly what the biggest problem they face in the winter. Probably just awful. Cold, finding prey. In the summer, when there's a lot of lemmings and voles, they can occur at higher densities, but in the winter they need to spread out. And so part of that spreading out involves most of them coming south and quite some distance. Another creature that lives in the same area and eats the same stuff as the snowy owl. And if you're a bird watcher, this is shaping up to be an exciting year for snowy owls. They're finding dozens and dozens of them along the eastern seaboard already. And they even had one in Bermuda, which is really far offshore. So hopefully, maybe we'll get some snowy owls out in Nevada here before too long. But anyway, rough-legged hawk. So you can find rough-legged hawk and ferruginous hawk and lots of red-tailed hawks in the Carson Valley right here, and it's sort of the happy hunting grounds all winter long for them. And Sierra Valley is a great place. We're thinking about maybe putting a hawk, a raptor watching day trip up to Sierra Valley later this winter, so stay tuned. Okay, and so a lot of these animals are going north, south, or heading down in either latitude or elevation, or both. Some animals just kind of track resources. They're looking for food. And bald eagles is a great example of that, in that they just sort of go in all kinds of crazy directions and wander around, and then patterns get established when they find consistent patterns of food distribution over time. So we don't really know what's going on with our bald eagles, where they come from, where they go back to. But it appears that they come in from somewhere when our kokanee are at their running in September and October, and still a lot of them, and sort of peak maybe around now or November, maybe even as late as January. We do a midwinter bald eagle count. If you guys are interested in that, it's pretty fun. You just go plop down on the beach for 3 hours and wait for an eagle to fly by. Sign up for Robin.
Bring a couple beers.
Yeah, it can be really cool too. But anyway, our eagles come in for the fish. They hang out because there's lots of coots. We have open water, so there's goldeneyes, there's waterfowl that they can hunt. And then in February, in Carson Valley, is lambing and calving season, and there's lots of stillborn livestock and afterbirth and stuff, and even cows that die during pregnancy or whatever. And they all get piled up in these boneyards and things. And almost all of our eagles just leave during February and March. They go down there and enjoy that bounty, and then it seems like half of them maybe come back and then hang out for another month or two, and then they split. Where do they all go? We don't know. But it's definitely not a north-south thing. It's like bald eagles in the Jackson Hole, Yellowstone area go northwest up to coastal British Columbia and southern Alaska for the winter. So it's weird. Okay, I didn't take this picture. I also didn't take these pictures. Hibernation. So hibernation is I didn't take that either. Hibernation is a weird phenomenon, and the people that really study these phenomena have a lot of funny words that mean different things in very precise and specific ways. And I'm not going to get into that because I honestly don't understand it, but I'm not sure they do too either. But the bottom line is there's a tremendous amount of energy to be saved if you can just chill out for a while. Just literally drop your body temperature, not try to fight that too much, not try to keep your metabolism going so that you're dividing cells and keeping yourself warm so that your muscles are ready to go and do stuff and active. If you just become inactive, you can save a lot of energy. And so there's a tremendous number of organisms that do this, even if it's only for brief periods of time. So some people, wonder, do our bears truly hibernate? I don't know. Bears sort of have a gradient of how long they are dormant for, depending on where they live, and largely dependent, even within where they live, on what the fall supply of food is. So for this part of California, most bears, this elevation, like to go down and take a nap for a little while, but if there's a ton of acorns, let's say, on the ground, come November, they'll stay awake longer. Okay? But if they're having a hard time finding food in October, November, they're much more prone to go down early. So they'll stay awake as long as it's easy, and then shut down. Which is interesting, because the longer they stay awake in one of those big food years, the better off they're going to be in terms of making it through a long winter. But they just don't have a choice necessarily. Now, all females have to go down for at least a few weeks, if not longer, because that is when they're denning, when they're asleep, is when they give birth, and when the young start suckling right away within the den. So all the females go down for a little while. Around here, almost all the bears go down, except those in neighborhoods where they have ready access to garbage through the year. Yes?
They're asleep when they're giving birth?
Yes. Yeah. And so, so around here, you know, that may be 2 months or something like that.
Sounds good.
In interior Alaska, it may be 9 months that they're denning. Now they'll wake up from time to time, become active, maybe do that thing that dogs do where they kind of like spin around on their bed and sit down again. But they don't really do much more than that. They don't urinate, they don't defecate, they don't eat anything. They don't do anything the whole time they're down, which is pretty wild. And the most amazing thing about it to me is as soon as they wake up, they've got fine motor skills, there's no atrophy going on, their muscles work, they're coordinated, and they're ready to sprint and chase down food.
Are there any theories on like how that happens?
There's lots of theories on it, and there's there's a group out of University of Alaska up in Fairbanks that is studying these and Arctic ground squirrels, looking at it for the pretty, you know, for the human health angle, right? Like how do people that say are in a coma for 9 months, you know, not waste away? We don't know. We haven't figured it out, but they're into it. They're looking at it. I mean, they go into these dens and then they like they tape it all off and put oxygen monitors in there and they study everything about it. It's pretty amazing stuff. Yeah.
What I had heard was that bears do what's called winter sleep instead of hibernating, and the difference is that an animal that hibernates is usually small, and you can't wake them up when they're hibernating, whereas the bears, if you go in and disturb them, my understanding is that they wake up and, you know.
I don't recommend you try that, first of all. I don't know that that's true, because the group up in Alaska is I know that they sometimes like will take sleeping bears, like, you know, and drag them out, and they've got sort of this window of time to move them into the lab or into a more sealed off area for exactly the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So I don't know. I really don't know. It's a hotly debated thing, and everyone always wants to know, do our bears hibernate? I mean, if you go down to Florida, no. They don't. I mean, black bears have a pretty gigantic range over this continent. And ours is sort of a mixed bag of some dormancy, some periods of dormancy that are variably long or short, depending on how much food they can find in the fall and whether it's male or female. A lot of variables. But whether you want to call it true hibernation or not, I can't answer that. Yeah.
How long is the gestation period, and do they have 1 or 2 cubs?
The gestation, I'm not sure of, but I could look it up real quick. But they around here, that kind of comes down to food. So 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3. I've seen triplets around here. I see twins a lot. We got a ton of bears. So there's probably more bears in Tahoe. There's almost certainly way more bears in Tahoe now than there ever were, you know, historically or prehistorically. Yeah, we don't have to get into the bear thing, but I'm happy to talk about bears afterwards. Okay, so one strategy that's interesting for if you're going to be dormant that a lot of snakes employ is they all go pile into the same place in what's called a hibernaculum. And bats do this. A lot of reptiles, snakes in particular, do this. And they all are able to sort of join up and huddle up and stay a little bit warmer, probably pretty deep underground. There are massive hibernacula in like Saskatchewan where apparently these garter snakes will migrate for, you know, like 12 miles to get to from everywhere within this, you know, big 24-mile circle. I don't know how far ours go, but sometimes in the spring you can see these big balls of garter snakes will come pouring out, and when they do, the female comes out and the males are just right on top of them, ready to mate. And this is what it looks like, which which is pretty exciting. So the big ones are females, and then all these little ones are males trying to mate with them. The female's just trying to get out of there. Yeah, it's pretty intense. Those who don't know, we have 4 species of snake here. 3 of them are garters, and this is a rubber boa on my friend Zach's thumb, and there's just the sweetest thing there ever was. A really wonderful disposition. If you know which one's the head here, right? So that's the head, but this kind of looks like the head. And what they do is they curl up into a mouse nest and stick that tail up in the air, and the mama mouse will just wail on the tail while they're gobbling up the baby mice. Screw them, but snakes got to eat too, and we got a lot of mice. But you always see the tail is all covered in scars. Now, rattlesnakes are coming. There was one photographed at Bear Lake, just south of Barker Pass, which is about 200 feet higher than the pass at McKinney-Rubicon. So all the snake's got to do is go due south and head east. All right.
No, have there been rattlesnakes reported in the basin?
I've never heard of any confirmed reports. Yeah. I mean, they occur at higher elevations. They're at, Silver Lake and stuff, higher than lake level, but they, for whatever reason, we don't have them. Sort of a paucity of reptiles and lizards and amphibians and stuff here.
The Truckee Animal Control Officer said he found them in your neighborhood in Glenside.
Well, that may be, but they're not in the Lake Tahoe basin. I've never encountered any, but I mean, we have stuff here that, like Glenshire, we have black widows, and ticks are moving in everywhere. They've made it into South Lake now. Sorry to say. Those are dog ticks, not the deer ticks. So we don't have Lyme disease. Yeah. Anyway, okay, I got to talk about frogs. This is a Sierra chorus frog. Used to be known as the Pacific tree frog. They come in all kinds of colors, and they're just absolutely everywhere around here where there's a little bit of water. Familiar with it? Most of you have probably seen it, I hope. They're teeny. And something completely amazing happens with them. And I'm going to tap out for 3 minutes or something here. And
this animal is going to freeze.
Freeze?
Freeze. Solid freeze.
That touch of ice immediately sets off signals inside the frog, says Professor John Costanzo, that pulls water away from the center of its body, so the frog's internal organs are now wrapped in a puddle of water that then turns to solid ice.
I still can't get over it. It's really an amazing thing.
There is no breathing, no kidney function. The heart stops.
And there'll be no heartbeat for a long period of time.
You mean as in no heartbeat?
Right. Nothing. Flat heart.
Flapper. For an hour or two?
It could be for days, perhaps even weeks.
Really? It sounds like it's virtually dead, no?
We know that the frog isn't dead, but he's probably about as close as you can get
To being dead.
Yes.
So, from the outside, this little frog feels like a rock. Except that as it froze, the frog flooded itself with a kind of sugar.
The frog's blood sugar is distributed through the circulatory system. It works like an antifreeze.
It's harder for the water to freeze, so cells stay just damp enough for the animal to hold itself together. Until the springtime. When the days grow a little longer, and the ground gets a little warmer, and then, well, a kind of miracle happens. After weeks or months of no heartbeat, none, suddenly there's a pulse. And that first heartbeat leads to another, and then another, and then within a day, and in the case of this little frog, it took about 10 hours, the animal literally comes back to life.
Spontaneous resumption of function.
Why?
We don't know. We don't know what triggers that event.
And think how elegant a business this is. Because although the sun is warming up the outside of this little guy, somehow his insides, his heart, his brain, they thaw first. His insides warm up before his outsides. But somehow it all happens in perfect synchrony every spring.
Yes, and it's going to undertake very energetic activity. It's mating time.
You mean hours after it thaws it's going to do it with a lady?
It's going to perform.
What an animal!
Say that?
I don't know. Well, we just did.
So we don't have wood frogs here, and they are the undisputed champions of this technique. And but we do have the chorus frogs, and they do this to a lesser degree. So where the wood frog can do this for maybe months at a time, our chorus frogs probably pull this off for a month or weeks or maybe a month and a half. I don't know. We don't know. But it's the same process. And so what's happening is, it was sort of oversimplified in terms of just the big pool of ice in the middle of the frog. That's not what happens. What they do is they as soon as a little bit of ice forms on or in their skin, within the first couple cell walls of their skin, sets off this chain reaction when they start all these hormonal changes, and then they start cranking glucose into their system where they want to protect cells, and then they put what are called nucleation sites. Ice crystals need to form on something. Okay, so in the sky, it's if it's dusty, you're more likely to get vapor turning into clouds and ice and stuff. Same thing with any water. So ice, they can put out proteins that act as nucleation sites, which basically means they're promoting ice to form where they want it to form, and they're pumping glucose as antifreeze where they don't want ice to form. And it's a lot of glucose. So here's a normal. See if I can show you a video. Oh, am I not going to be able to show you this? Oh. All right, let's try a different approach. Oh man. Okay, hold on. This worked like several times. Oh, yeah.
That's the view from far away, my friend. Really far. Can we get a little closer to that frog?
Here's the thing.
Let's kill it.
Here's the thing about North American wood frogs. They're small.
Okay, we don't have wood frogs, but our chorus frogs do the same thing.
Hiding on the forest floor.
He's camouflaged. His coloration is the same as the soil around him. You see him here? He's cold.
You can find them here in southern Ohio and all the way up to the Arctic Circle. But wherever they are, once it gets cold with the first sprinkle of ice, this frog does something I didn't know was possible. As soon as the frog just touches an ice crystal.
A human, this is 90 to 110 micrograms per 100 milliliters of blood, standard, healthy person. This would be considered diabetic, all right, in a human. That's what they're doing. Okay, so it's a lot, and that's sugar. It's got to come from somewhere. So they got to eat a lot of crickets or whatever to convert all that. And yeah, it's a really phenomenally amazing process. And they do thaw out and become active while it's still very cold. You can hear our western toads and lots and lots of these frogs, and here, but we also have long-toed salamanders, and all of them start breeding as soon as the little ponds and marshes are a little bit thawed. As soon as they can get into the water, they don't necessarily need an open pond. They just need access to some water. You'll hear these things singing in March and stuff when it's just freezing at lake level, which is impressive. Okay, insects. Insects, incredible diversity of insects leads to incredible diversity of strategies in terms of how they're going to cope with the winter. So they kind of cover all three. We've got migrants. I don't know if anybody noticed. I certainly did, but all through November, late October through November, we had lots and lots of painted ladies and maybe some West Coast ladies. This is a West Coast lady flying through the area. That's unprecedented in my experience for this time of year, this elevation anyway. So we have migrants, we have some that hunker down. So I have a shed in my backyard and it's full of these right now, which is a pentadonid stink bug, shield bug. And then a lot of insects are able to actually stick it out and remain active through the winter. If you think about it, we get periods of pretty cold temperatures, but we also have some nice sunny days. January, you do have some flying insects and things. There's a lot of a few handful anyway of stonefly species that emerge during winter only. So anyway, these are tunnels of wood-boring beetle larvae. And the wood-boring beetle larvae, they're protected under the bark, and if you're on the south side of the tree, it can be probably pretty warm under there. And this in turn provides food for woodpeckers through the winter. So one of the main things insects do, though, is they just make a lot of babies. If you make a lot of babies, it's okay to lose. It's okay to lose a lot of babies through the winter. So I think we run a little long on time. I won't worry about that. But anyway, they employ a lot of the same strategies that the frog does. They try to direct where things are freezing, where things aren't freezing, and plants do this a lot too. Really try to direct what tissues freeze, what tissue does not freeze, what tissue is okay to get torn up. But you don't want too much of your cellular tissue getting torn up. Okay. Squirrels are an interesting case because there's a pretty good diversity of squirrels here, and they employ a whole diversity of tactics. None of them migrate; they're too small, right? And migration isn't very efficient for land mammals as a rule. North America, caribou, kind of the only thing that does much. Bison did that was more of a food thing. Anyway. Okay, so we have the main thing to consider if you're a squirrel is where do you spend all your time and where do you find your food. So if you are a northern flying squirrel and you like to nibble on fungus that's up in trees, well, that's going to be accessible through the winter, so you're free to stay active through the winter. And it's a good thing because spotted owls need something to eat. Deer mice actually stay active through the winter too. It's pretty interesting. I don't really quite understand how they do it. Chipmunks, they hibernate, but their strategy, they cache a lot of food. They're the good kind of squirrel that like really prepares a lot of food for the winter, puts it in underground burrows, a couple different strategies. Some of them put it all in one big cache. They're called larder hoarders. Some of them spread their caches all over because they get stolen by other chipmunks that are watching, and jays. And those are called scatter hoarders. Anyway, when a chipmunk hibernates, they wake up, truly wake up, and they'll eat a little bit. They'll go to the bathroom, and they kind of stretch out a little bit, and they go back to bed. So, and if it's nice enough and they can pop out, sometimes in the middle of winter on a sunny day, you might see a chipmunk running around, or around a bird feeder. Sometimes you'll see chipmunks that are active midwinter. If you're a ground squirrel living up at Tahoe Meadows, forget it. You're going to hibernate. So these are Belding's ground squirrels. They occur at high grassy meadows that are kind of like nice putting green kind of meadows. So Tahoe Meadows up on Mount Rose Highway, High Camp up at Squaw Valley, those sorts of places. So they live pretty high, and they just like grass. And because they live at such high places, they've evolved, much like the Arctic ground squirrel, to spend most of the year underground. The female Belding ground squirrels to save energy, will go underground and start taking a nap as early as late August. And so some of them may be underground for 9 months, or 8 or 9 months again. So that sort of ties it almost with the Arctic ground squirrels. It's right here. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, August, September, these are nice times at Tahoe, but they go down anyway because the energy savings is enough that that's just the way they work it. So most of the chipmunks put away food for later. One of the chipmunks does put on a little bit of fat. Our marmot puts on a lot of fat. And fat is pretty handy because it can keep you warm, and it also provides direct energy through when you metabolize it. So the problem with being a big fat marmot is that you're slow and you're easy pickings for martins and golden eagles and things like that. And they kind of know it. So what they do is they hold off on their gluttony until the very end of the summer, which is too bad because it's the early part of the season is when all the grass and everything is most nutritious. So they kind of wait till it turns brown, and then they go after the hay, and then they gorge themselves like crazy. That hypophagy, that like cannot control themselves eating. Same thing bears do. And then they go down. You will note how fat and round he is. You can insulate yourself with fat and fur and feathers. This is my backyard, Glenshire again. That's another pig now, much better picture. This is a Nettles cottontail in my backyard, fur. And notice something common shape of these things. They're trying to maximize their volume to surface area ratio because you lose heat off your surface area, right? And so trying to be round is sort of a fundamental way to stay warm. This is not only a sort of behavioral adaptation, but it also applies to the way these things are built. And so there's something called Allen's rule that states that limbs and appendages within a genus, within a group of species, tend to be shorter as you go up in latitude, right? So here's the Arctic hare, here's the snowshoe hare, here's a black-tailed jackrabbit, here's an antelope jackrabbit. As you go out into the desert, you get longer legs, longer ears, and that helps to keep them cool. But amazingly, our white-tailed jackrabbit is kind of built like this. Doesn't always work that good. One way that you can increase your volume to surface area ratio is through teamwork. And so these are actually eastern bluebirds. I didn't take this picture, but we have western bluebirds and mountain bluebirds, and they do this. I have a bluebird box in my backyard, and I've seen 11 of them go in there at night, at dusk in the springtime. And they just pile in there. I think there's 13 in this picture, which is just amazing. And so if you've all seen March of the Penguins, that's what they're doing. They're all kind of huddling into the middle to get warm. This is a drawing of 4 golden crowned kinglets that are huddled on a twig. You just see their tails sticking off. But basically, they're all piled in there together, trying to keep as warm as possible. One of the many benefits of teamwork in the wintertime. There are others, and a lot of birds in particular team up in these mixed species flocks. Now, this is a flock of eastern birds, so don't panic if you don't recognize why there's tree sparrows in there and stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of advantages to this. One of the main ones is you can spread out in a front and find resources cooperatively. And when somebody over here finds resources, everybody can gather up. Once you've located the resources and are on top of the food, you can spend more of your energy and your effort just feeding, and you've got more eyes looking out for predators, right? Most birds don't do this year-round. They only do this in the winter because in the summer they're territorial, they're trying to exclude other individuals from the resources and they're being selfish so that they can share them with their young and use them to make young. Okay. I mentioned that snow is a real problem in many circumstances, but it's also a real boon for a lot of things. Snow is a fantastic insulator, especially around here where it just becomes this like thick, solid, impenetrable mass of Sierra cement. Underneath there, right on the ground is giving off heat. There's plants that are still metabolizing and maybe even growing a little bit, and they're giving off some heat. So if you're right down on the ground under the snow, and if you can make your living through the winter that way, you can stay pretty warm. It may be 34, maybe even 36 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that, where the air temperature above can be really cold. Another thing it does is it protects you from attack from above. Maybe you've probably seen the footage of foxes going face first into the snow after the voles, but voles are harder to catch under 2 feet of snow than they are just out in the grass. So because of that, they go crazy in the winter, and they're able to stay active and breed all winter long. So this is my backyard again. And this is, if you have a lawn around here, this is sort of what it looks like in the spring every year. The voles, they're close relatives of lemmings, they're little meadow mice. And they can breed through the winter, and they just explode during the wintertime. And most predators can't get to them very well. So there's a whole world of activity going on right at the ground level. Insects that are active through the winter, shrews and moles, which seem like they're mice, but they're not. They're insectivores. They eat meat. They need to chase down bugs. And a little teeny shrew is one of the highest metabolisms around. They actually have a harder time getting through the night in the summertime here than they do under the snow with the insulation. It's sort of amazing. And then a whole other topic is what goes on under the ice. If you think about it, water is just this really unique element here on Earth in that it expands not only when it turns to vapor, but also when it freezes. And because it expands when it freezes, it floats. And because it floats, ice forms at the top of the water column, which means the whole rest of the water column can be protected from the cold by that ice. Right? It'll get thick to a degree, and it may freeze all the way through in a shallow enough body of water. But, around here, we don't usually get ice much more than, say, this thick. It doesn't freeze at all on Tahoe, except in some of the bays. And so you do have reduced sunlight penetrating. You have vegetation is rotting underneath. There's less oxygen. There's all sorts of problems that occur in the winter. But by and large, if you're a fish, it's kind of business as usual, minus the eagles and the osprey, and the kingfishers and the mergansers. And so it's not, not so bad. Anyway, the fascinating thing to ponder, what life on Earth might not even be possible if ice formed at the bottom of the water column. But because it is the way it is, a lot of stuff happens. Okay, no matter what your strategy is, you need to prepare yourself. Right? There's a parable out there somewhere about this. I didn't take this picture. That's an eastern chipmunk. But what's he doing is he's got his cheeks, these fur-lined cheek pouches that are just full of seeds, and he's getting ready to get himself a nice store of seeds for the winter. But this applies to even if you're going to migrate, you need to put on a lot of fat so you can make the journey. Right? Or fat if you're going to hunker down, and you need to make sure you give yourself enough time. Right? So if you're going to make babies and you want your babies to get through the winter, you got to make sure you give them enough time. That's another consideration in terms of birds that are migrating in from somewhere else. They got to get here early enough so they have enough time to get them up, get them grown, get them back on their way. This poor little bear was up at Tahoe Meadows on Thanksgiving Day a few years ago, and I only get enough time. This is a pika. It's a close relative of our rabbits. And all of our rabbits stay active through the winter. The pika instead of running on top of the snow, they live in talus slopes, big jumbles of rocks beneath cliffs and rocky slopes. And what they do is, towards the second half of the summer, they make little hay piles. They dry the vegetation, and they put up hay for the winter, just like any farmer, horses or cows. And so they take these little hay piles, they drag them down into the talus, and they spend all winter long under the snow, awake, bored out of their minds, in the dark, eating hay. They are cute. Okay, another way you can prepare yourself is camouflage. We have 5 species of animals that turn white in the winter. So I already showed you the white-tailed jackrabbit. This is a snowshoe hare. They have much shorter ears, and you can't see the tail. That's the key. And they're little, smaller. So they turn white, white-tailed jacks. We have 2 species of weasels. I did not take this picture. He's got a vole. That's a vole. So you're not entirely safe in the winter. We have short-tail, long-tail weasels. And then we have white-tailed ptarmigan, barely. So I took this picture down at Carson Pass. There's actually no records within the Tahoe Basin watershed, but they're just like... These were 200 yards from the hydrologic rim. So this is actually an imported species from Colorado. They're not native, but they were released. It's kind of an amazing story. Fish and Game, for whatever reason, wanted more stuff for people to shoot. And so they started to hatch a scheme where they were going to bring ptarmigan into the Sierra Nevada. And they released them in the Bridgeport area, Twin Lakes. And so this may be apocryphal, I don't know, but the story goes is they chucked them out of the plane on their first attempt. And chickens don't fly that well. Anyway. But they live at really high elevations, so they didn't want to have to hike them up there. So that was their first attempt. Now, eventually they got them established, and you can find these around Carson Pass for sure. Let me know if you find one like in Mice Country or something. I'd love that.
Now, Will, you said they turn white?
They do. So, okay, great question. As with the mammals and the birds, their hair or feathers its individual feathers and hair doesn't turn. They replace them with new ones that are white. So it goes through a molt. And in fact, ptarmigan have 3 molts per year, which is pretty unusual for maybe even 4, right? I can't remember. But they have a supplemental molt that's unusual among birds, that they go through this like third. So they can either be brown, white, or this sort of patchwork calico thing in between. And those are 3 distinct plumages. The rabbits and the weasels, they just sort of shed their summer coat and bring on a winter coat that's all white. They not replace, they got little white toes and white bellies, so they might not replace everything, but they probably do. Most of our mammals, like our chipmunks, they have sort of 3 distinct looks over the year. Because they're molting in the spring, and so they look really fresh through the summer, and then they look a little bit worn in the fall, but then they have then they molt again, and then that molt, that pelage, that look wears over the course of hibernation. So when they come out in spring, they look totally different again. Yeah.
We had a weasel around the house. Like this guy, he would, in the wintertime, turn white with a brown tip or dark tip on the
Yeah, a little black tip right on the tip.
In the summertime, he would turn brown with a white tip on it.
Oh, really? That's wild. I've never heard of that. Yeah, that's interesting. That's not typical. That's not typical. We have 2 species of weasel, long-tailed, short-tailed, and they're basically the same. Long-tailed is much bigger on average, but you want to look for, is it yellow under here or is it white in the summer? In the winter, they're really hard to tell apart unless you get a good look at the size. But even still. Okay, one last thing as far as preparation. Amid all the hardships of winter, as difficult as it is, we do have 2 bird species that will reproduce and make babies right through the winter. No, that's not true. Sorry. We have 2 that will sing. One is The crossbill will make babies. These will lay eggs and raise young if they can find enough seeds. They can find enough pine cones. And the other, the Townsend solitaire, doesn't reproduce in the winter. Sorry about that. But they do sing. And so both of these species can be heard singing through the winter. The Townsend solitaire loves juniper berries. And males will go to high ridgetop for some of the harshest places to be in the wintertime. And they will set up shop with these junipers, and they will carve out a little patch of territory. And the way birds defend territory is through song. And so you can hear these singing on an awful day in January on the mountaintop. There'll be a bird singing away. It's a Townsend solitaire. It's in the thrush family. And they'll defend them from robins and bluebirds and anybody else and other solitaires that come around. And then the crossbill, they're highly nomadic, and they come through in massive numbers sometimes. When they find a lot of pine cones that are in season, ready to go, they'll just stop right there, set up shop, and have young, no matter what time of year. Except for October through early December, they have to molt. Other than that, yeah. I think that's it. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go a little long, but...
Perfect.
Questions? Yes.
What do beavers do in there?
Great question. So they remain active, but so they're one that really benefits from being under the ice. Right? Beaver do have predators, coyotes, bobcats, and mountain lions in particular, and so they're warm and comfy in that lodge, and they cruise around under the ice. But they've got to find a way to get out. So a lot of the beavers will have one or two little burrow systems that go into the bank so they can kind of squeak out to the sides. And if it's nice, they'll be active. If it's stormy, they'll just lay low for a week or whatever. But they do remain active. And we have muskrat here too. And I'm not sure. They're probably active too. They're very closely related to the voles. Yeah.
When you say that they're active, do they continue with the dam building?
No, but no, I don't think so. I think they, and they're not thinking about reproducing or anything like that. So they're active. They're not doing all of their activities, but they're going about their feeding business. But yeah, actually, winter is, I think, the favorite time for trappers to hunt beaver because that's when they got their thickest coats on, right? They couldn't trap them if they weren't active. So they're out and about. Yeah.
And they stockpile shoots and so forth to be able to stay in their dens and eat there rather than have to go out and look for food.
Right. I don't know if they can stockpile enough for the whole winter. So, but yeah. So I don't know if you guys heard that in the back, but it's a great point. They, much like the pika and the chipmunks, they sort of hoard food away. So they'll take a ton of twigs and sticks and decent size. Beaver have sort of particular sizes that they like, and I don't know if the size shrinks down in the winter. Probably. Do they? I don't know. Do they pile them all in one spot, or they bring them in towards the lodge, or they put them underwater?
I thought maybe like underwater, but close to where they
yeah.
live, so that they can just get down.
I've seen piles and stuff, and I wondered, yeah.
What about coyotes?
Coyotes are active.
All year?
All year, yep. And, I tell you, they had a rough go in Incline and in Truckee last winter because a couple of mountain lions usually follow the deer downhill. That's their main prey base, but there were at least a couple of coyote or mountain lions that one was in Third Creek area here in Incline, and one was seen like downtown Truckee and Martis area. They were eating coyotes because the deer were gone. So, yikes.
What about porcupines?
Porcupines have to be around. Their prey doesn't go anywhere. So, yeah, they probably put on a little bit thicker fur and.
But they're in the trees or underground?
Well, they waddle around from tree to tree, and so when there's a lot of soft snow, they probably kind of hang out. But we're pretty lucky here. If you're an animal that has to worry about walking around on snow, the snow warms up here so fast and gets dense, and it forms a pretty good surface to get around on. But but they feed up in the trees. But you also see them like gnawing around at the base of trees, depending on the diameter of the tree. And I've never seen one in the winter, but I know they're active.
Yeah, you talked about the ground squirrels that are underground and they hibernate, and then you talked about the voles who are also underground that don't hibernate.
Well, the voles are sort of on the ground, under the snow.
Okay.
So they're operating in that sort of boundary where it's warm but right under the snow and they're protected. And they'll go underground a little bit, a few inches and stuff. Certainly in the summer, then they go underground a lot more to make these little tunnels. But the ground squirrels go down.
But what makes them hibernate and the voles not hibernate?
I think probably just interject demands. They're smaller, and they can get away with eating, finding smaller bits of food and stuff. Also, lifestyle. They're just kind of built for crawling around in tight spaces, whereas the ground squirrels are, they like to stand up and look around. And it could be just that they got onto one evolutionary trajectory, and that's just the way it went. Yeah, so that's a great question. I don't know. To be honest, I can speculate, which I'm doing. Yeah.
So, is the chorus frog the same thing as the tree frog
Yeah.
that you find in the coast?
Taxonomy of that genus has gotten chopped up a little bit over the last.
I just wondered if you took a coastal one and put ice on it, what would it do?
I don't know, but I don't imagine they're adapted for it.
So it's not necessarily just genetic; it's an adaptation. Well, I guess it did select
Well, it is,
for
but
this huge glucose.
Right. So it's a great question. I mean, if you look at black bears, that's all one species, and so they're adjusting their behaviors and on a sort of a more local or regional scale. And so there may be a decline of gradient of that adaptation. Whereas as you go down the west slope, you see less and less of it, and when you get down to the coast range, then probably none. Who knows? Maybe they haven't. Maybe they've retained it and never use it. It's hard to know how costly that adaptation would be to just be sitting idle. It could be a new thing that's evolved, Up here, yeah, and in several different species or something. I don't know. That's interesting to ponder. You have a question? Okay. Yes?
Are there mink up here?
Absolutely. Yep. They you find them along larger creeks and rivers, some of the larger tributaries. I also see them a lot on the east shore, where there's the big jumbles of granite erratics and stuff. They like that kind of habitat. And I see them around boatyards and harbors and stuff occasionally. Beg pardon?
Do they turn white?
They do not. They're chocolate brown. They do have a little white chin, sometimes a little white down into the throat. But we definitely have mink. And if you want to see a mink in Tahoe, it's a little trickier. But in the winter, if you go down to Reno to Idlewild Park, they get really bold and they pop out. You can see them pretty regularly there. I don't think they move around that much. If they've got things to eat, crayfish and fish, then they'll probably stay pretty happy. Yeah, and they'll take down pretty big prey too. I think that's why they're in Idlewild. There's lazy ducks that get fed bread.
All right. Well, if anyone has any additional questions, I'm sure you'd be willing to stick around.
Absolutely.
So let's give Will a round of applause.